Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, as the colder weather sets in, we start hearing more about fire safety, home safety, and messages from the Joplin Fire Department. Well, today we're going to visit with the Chief, Jim Furgerson. Thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I know October's Fire Prevention Month. We have a lot of emphasis this time of year about fireplace safety, but it's really a year-round concern for the fire department.
It really is. Fire Prevention Month is just, you know, we're really busy because we're keying in on visiting with younger children about fire safety. And you're true. I mean, fire safety, fire prevention is a big thing for us year-round. We're in schools year-round. We are talking with social groups, elderly groups, things like that year-round because it is such a concern for us.
So for your role as chief and the whole fire department itself, it's more than just going out and taking care of emergency situations, but education's a big part of what you do.
It really is, because education in my mind is the biggest prevention. You know, if we teach kids not to play with matches, not to what to do if their home catches on fire, things like that, it really hopefully goes up to those years. You know, when we get to talking to adults, we're talking about smoke detectors, making sure they change their batteries. When we change the clocks, we're talking about fireplace safety, space heater safety, you know, utilizing, making sure you don't overload electrical outlets, things like that, making sure you inspect those chimneys, especially now as we get into cooler weather. You know, you want to make sure that your chimney is inspected, it's clean. That's a cause of flue fires all year round. If you use space heaters, make sure you keep everything around them clear, because that's what causes a lot of our fires.
So this changing season time of the year, when maybe it's the first time all year somebody's turned on that space heater or they fire up the fireplace, those are things they need to be aware of. You haven't used it for 9 months, now you have to go back and be careful with it.
Exactly right, exactly right. You know, any time you let something sit over time, and you know, you do get sometimes concerned where when you first turn on the heat, you know, you smell that, you see that little smoke, and you know, while it is some concern, if it goes away, it's usually what happens is a lot of times dust gets built up in those ducts over the summer, so you'll get that smell. But if it stays around, lingers around longer than you expect, go ahead and call the fire department. We'll come out and take a look.
Great. Well, today we'd like to talk a little bit, of course, about fire safety and the role of the fire department, and you do a lot of things for the community, so kind of a community awareness and find out what's, you know, happening in Joplin. Starting off, I guess, with fire safety, though, one of our students did have an opportunity to visit your stations and get a little background on tying into fire safety, as we said, this time of year. So I think we'll kind of set the tone along those lines. We have a package that Ryan Land put together, so let's take a look at fire safety from the student perspective in the program we have here.
Approaching, fire hazards will start to become more common, and for members of the Joplin Fire Department, teaching the general public about fire safety keeps the department busy.
During October, we do a lot of, we call them puppet shows. We have a setup where we go to different like kindergartens or preschools, and we talk to the kids about our main thing is not being afraid of firefighters.
During a school visit, firefighters encourage children to communicate with their parents about creating a plan of evacuation in case of a house fire, as well as making the message clear that the evacuation exercise needs to be executed quickly in the event of a real fire.
The main thing we would like to get out is for kids, if they do happen to wake up or their house is on fire at any time, get low, get out, and have a meeting place.
Even though the month of October is dedicated to fire prevention and safety, the Joplin Fire Department stays busy year-round, not only with visiting school children, but many other tasks within the community.
Another thing we do is we do business inspections throughout the year, and we go through and we make sure that every business in Joplin is safe with regards to the fire, their fire suppression, and elements like that.
Upcoming cold weather means more people will use different items to keep their house warm, and Joplin firefighter EMT Dustin Burns says more wintertime fires occur in a place that they should not.
There's actually a lot more house fires in the winter because of people using other heating elements, space heaters, not plugged into the correct outlets or outlets getting overloaded.
Burns says proper placement of any heating source in a room is crucial to preventing house fires.
Just keep it away from like the curtains, bedding, things like that. Kind of keep it in an open area, make sure nothing's close to it or anything like that.
The department urges the public to use caution when burning leaves, brush, and having bonfires.
If it's not a burn day, it usually means it's high winds or it's rainy, and so we tell them not to burn on those days to keep from spreading, because a lot of times those can spread to homes very easily.
Reporting in Joplin, this is Ryan Land for KGCS-TV.
As we could see from that story, a lot of things go into education, fire prevention, as your officers and everyone explaining. Also mentioning smoke alarms. You mentioned that at the beginning of the program, changing your batteries.
That's right. You know, a lot of fires, you know, early detection is key, and smoke alarms give us and the citizens early detection. Mm-hmm. But in order for them to work, you need to make sure that the battery's changed. And the biggest thing to do, the best thing to do is when you change your clock, change your battery. That way there's always a fresh battery in there, because that early warning at the first sign of smoke, that gets you out before it's too late.
Now, do you have services that might help? I know we have a lot of senior citizens, for instance, in the community that maybe don't feel safe about climbing up on that ladder to reach that smoke alarm up on the wall.
We do. You know, we do a couple different things. In regards to that, if someone calls and says, hey, can you help me change my battery? As long as we're not busy running emergency calls, yeah, we'll go out there and help any individual we can. We also care enough we actually give away smoke detectors. If a citizen comes into the station and says, hey, I need a couple smoke detectors, we give them a couple smoke detectors, tell them where the best place to install those smoke detectors are, kind of educate them a little bit, and they give them those free smoke detectors.
Now, somebody may have lived in their home for a long time, maybe going back once again to the senior citizens. Is there a lifespan for those? They may have been in the same house for 20, 25 years.
You know, I think it varies from manufacturer to manufacturer. Mm-hmm. You know, some of them may have a 10-year life, some may have a longer life. I'm not real sure. The best thing that I would advise anyone to do is if they buy a new smoke detector is just kind of read over the manufacturer's directions, follow those instructions, and that should give you the lifespan of those as well.
Now, at the end of the story that we saw, I mentioned burn days and leaf burning. And Joplin is still, I guess, legal to burn your leaves, but you have regulations. You need to follow certain steps.
We do. You know, if you want to burn within the city limits of Joplin, you have to make sure that you burn natural vegetation. Mm-hmm. Natural vegetation are things like brush, leaves, yard waste, no trash, no treated lumbers. You know, our website was shown earlier today. That's a great place to go to find out if we're allowing burning that day, because we always post it on that burn condition, as well as calling 417-623-0403, and that will also let you know whether we're burning on a day-to-day basis. And if it's windy, if it's raining, if it's been really dry, those are going to be obvious no burn days. But that's the quickest way to get information is our website.
So you need to check before you say, I'm going to go out and work in the yard today and burn those leaves.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
tie
ma'am.
that together. Now, is there a permit involved? They need to actually visit the station?
Yes, there is. If you come to the stations, the permits are $5. Okay. If you come to the station to get a permit, you need to make sure you have check or money order. We don't take cash at the fire stations. Those permits are good for 3 days. If, say, for instance, in the middle of that 3 days we're not allowing burning, we actually extend that burn permit 1 extra day. You can also go to the 3rd floor in our finance department at City Hall, and they do accept cash there for the same burn permit.
So people need to be aware of these requirements.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Let's talk about the fire department itself. We're talking about the city of Joplin, but when you look at square miles, you cover a lot of area for the city.
We do. I think, if I remember correctly, we just went through an ISO rating, and we had, I believe, 432 road miles that we cover within the city limits of Joplin. So we do have a lot of area to cover, and the city's rapidly growing too.
Annexes, right?
So as we try to grow with it as the city grows. So yeah, it is a very big area. Now,
speaking of growth, you've grown the number of stations over the last few years as well.
We do. We have 6 fire stations. We built Station 6 shortly after the tornado in May of 11. I think that station opened in June. We are actually in the planning stages in the process of building Station 7, which will be out east, which was also another public safety tax initiative that the citizens passed back in 2006. So there's a lot of planning, along with our training facility coming. There's a lot of growth going on within the fire department as well as the city.
You mentioned the public safety tax, and that's one big factor in allowing you to continue to grow as the city grows and it has more people to serve.
It is. You're exactly right. And most of these projects, Station 6, Station 7, the training facility as a whole would not have been possible if it wouldn't have been for the generous support of our tax-paying citizens in 2006, and for that we're truly grateful. So there's a lot of exciting things coming.
Let's talk about the fire training facility. I know at the beginning of the year, I remember seeing a news release. We've talked about it for a while now. It's going to happen. Give people perhaps an update on what's happening there.
Back in January when I had the press conference, I kind of described it as being in 2 different phases. We had phase 1, which was the training grounds themselves. That included the training tower, a driving pad, multiple areas for different types of training, like a car fire prop, a dumpster fire prop, a Christmas tree fire prop, some flammable liquid props, and on the PD side, we had the SWAT obstacle course, a K9 obstacle course, And that is about 98, 99% complete right now. So what we're doing right now is just going through the punch list items. We've actually started doing a little bit of training out there, not a lot, just to make sure that everything's up to par. And hopefully in the next few weeks, we look to have an open house out there to invite the citizens out to see what their tax dollars paid for.
And from your perspective as chief, what does this mean for your department to be able to have your employees here in the city being able to have that kind of ongoing education and training?
Oh, it's huge. There isn't a training facility around like ours within 100+ miles. So number one, it makes it more effective for us to train because we don't have to send guys off to St. Louis, Kansas City, Tulsa, those areas. We can do that right now in our own backyard, and it's safer. Before we had to use dilapidated structures, older homes that may not be suitable to train in, and now we have a controlled environment and a controlled area for police and fire both to train. So it's just much safer.
So the whole public safety aspect of the community is enhanced by this type of
That is
program.
correct. And that's the biggest thing, to make sure that people are aware this is a public safety, not just a fire, not just the police. It is public safety as a whole.
Now, are there requirements that the state or anyone has that you must have, I will use the term continuing education, but continuing training for people who are working for the department?
We do. I mentioned ISO earlier, which is Insurance Service Organization. They come down and rate our fire department. We have to have, each guy has to have 20 hours of training a month. Now, that doesn't mean all hands-on. That can mean books, watching videos, that type, but you do got to have a little bit of hands-on training every month. So it makes it that much easier for us.
Now, the ISO, some people might not be sure what that stands for, or what it means for them, perhaps, as a citizen in Joplin.
It does. ISO is what sets our insurance rates
Okay.
For businesses and residential. We just actually went through an ISO evaluation, and we remained a 3. I'm very optimistic in the near future that we will be able to go to a 2, given the training facility that we just built. So basically, ISO sets your insurance rates.
So the ratings of the city, what the process and the programs you are putting in place will then eventually perhaps help the citizens and lower rates for them in insurance.
Yes, ma'am, that is exactly correct. And that's been one of our goals for some time. We just lack that training facility. Now that we got that training facility, get a year usage, and hopefully we'll get it lowered.
Right. Now, this facility being the only type of its kind for 100 miles, do you see this perhaps serving other communities around Joplin? We're a regional center. There's a lot of surrounding communities with their own fire and police departments.
You're right, and we have discussed that. I know that the police have a little bit more opportunity than we do to bring training in. The unique thing about fire department training is it's paid for by the state, so a lot of it's free. But yeah, so we can bring those people in to train in the tower to get that live fire experience, and there is that possibility.
And tying that together. Now, you talked about the public safety tax. I know when it was passed, there was also talk about being able to increase the staffing for the fire department. So people might be curious, do we actually have more firefighters, EMTs, people on staff now than we did a few years ago?
I believe we do. We currently have a department of 95 personnel. Once we build Station 7, we'll have 107. I want to say before the public safety tax, we were right around upper 70s, low 80s in personnel. So when that station was built, I think we added 15 personnel. We'll add another additional 12 when Station 7's built.
Great. So being able to reach with more people to serve the community, tying everything together. So the different areas of the fire department, of course, you have the day-to-day operations. The stations are there ready on call when something comes up, to represent, deal with emergencies and calls that are placed. The calls also coming through a center. I mean, you still have a call center taking those 911 calls and dispatching them to you, correct?
We do. We have the Joplin Communication Center, which handles all our 911 calls. And I want to say last year that they took 10 to 15,000 calls, maybe more. I'm not real sure, but they are a very busy center, because they handle police, fire, and EMS.
Right.
So they do. Basically, a call comes in, they get it. It's either a police call or a fire call. They dispatch us, and then we'll handle it from there.
Now, you mentioned calls, EMS and so forth, but a lot of times when we see an emergency medical situation, your people are the first responders. We see the fire truck before we see an ambulance.
You're exactly right. And the reason that is we're geographically located throughout the city. So an ambulance may or may not be in the station. We can get there a lot quicker, usually sometimes 2 to 3 minutes quicker than an ambulance, depending on where that ambulance is or depending on where we are. So we are truly a first responder. I want to say that our response times are anywhere between 2 and 3 minutes from time of we go en route to the time we get to the scene. So that's the primary the reason why we do that.
So how does this affect the training for your people who are going to those scenes? EMT training, is there available service?
We do, and that's another good thing about the training center is, you know, I have two staff in my training office. I have a training officer that's in charge of fire training and a training officer that's in charge of our emergency medical services.
Oh, okay.
So we do both trainings every month. Now, in order to work for the Joplin Fire Department, you have to be an EMT at minimum, and that requires you to get 110 CEUs every 3 years. So we do make sure that we're training on that aspect, because that is the bigger demand is EMS calls. We probably run about 80-85% EMS calls to fire calls. So that is a big focus of ours.
And so people need to be prepared, your staff is prepared to deal with that. Fire calls, obviously, those come up, as we said earlier, year-round, but in the package we saw that there's concern about the winter months and home fire safety, that you're doing more perhaps that could lead to those fires for people.
You're exactly right, and those guys brought up some great points. When you have those space heaters on, keep them clear. When you have a fire going in your fireplace, before you start the fire up in the fireplace, as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that those chimneys are clean, there's no cracks, have them inspected, make sure everything's ready to go. That way you can prevent that disaster down the road.
Now we're coming up on the holiday season. We always hear about fire safety around the Christmas season with Christmas trees and so forth too. So that's a whole nother seasonal thing still to come. You're
exactly right. You have a lot of people burning candles. You have a lot of people with live Christmas trees. The biggest thing that you want to do if you have a live Christmas tree is make sure you keep it watered. That is the biggest thing. Those trees have a tendency to dry out pretty quickly once they're cut. So you want to keep it watered as best you can. If you have a candle, make sure you don't go off and leave it burning when you leave the house. Don't overload your electrical outlets. If you're using don't use those real cheap 97-cent extension cords. Use a power strip, because they have breakers in them that will once again prevent that disaster down the road that you don't want to occur.
So you don't want to have too many lights plugged into that cord, and it's going to cause through the problems for the house. The package also talked about working with businesses, and fire inspections, fire safety from the business perspective is a big role for your department.
We do. There's three divisions within the fire department: administration, prevention and education, and then training. And prevention and education, as I mentioned earlier, prevention is the biggest key to having fires and having those emergencies, is to be prepared and be educated. We do go out in the community. Our goal is to inspect every business in the city, within the city limits of Joplin, every year, to make sure that those businesses are up to code. They're not using extension cords, clear exit pathways. Their extinguishers are up and charged, ready to go. If their sprinkler systems are working properly, things like that. So we want to ensure that they're safe, as well as the citizens going into those businesses are safe as well.
So they have certain rules they need to follow to be certified to even continue operating business.
They do, and all those can be found even on the website. Once again, joplinmo.org. There is a list of our codes on that website to make sure that businesses are up to codes.
Now, you mentioned the website and the joplinmofire.org. That's really a source of a lot of information for people who might have questions about your services, what's available, and what's there.
It really is. The biggest thing that you can get off it is the burn condition. As I mentioned earlier, if you need to contact one of the chief officers, there's a link on there to access our email through the city email. There is pictures of our stations where where they're located. If you want to know which one's closest to you, all our staff are on there. So it is a very useful website, as well as it gets you in touch with our emergency management director as well, because emergency management is under the fire department as well.
Falls together with that. And so if someone has a question for the fire department, but it's not an emergency, they don't need to call 911. They can go find out what the phone number is for that station down the street or in their neighborhood.
You're exactly right. And the biggest way to get information is to dial that 623-0403 number that I mentioned earlier. That gets you into our main fire station, where our battalion chief is, which is where all our administrative chiefs are, myself and the deputy chief. So if you want information, that's probably the quickest way to get it.
And for those familiar with Joplin, that's the downtown station.
Yes, ma'am. That's the downtown fire station. It's at 303 East 3rd.
Great. When it comes to equipment, I know you've been able to upgrade some equipment in those stations throughout the last couple of years as well.
We have. We've been pretty fortunate to, fortunate and unfortunate at the same point in time. As you all recall, we had a couple of stations hit by the tornado in May of 11. and we did have to replace a couple apparatus. We have upgraded some reserve apparatus as well. We've added a new rescue truck, which carries all sorts of equipment, the extrication equipment, anything that we might need in a technical rescue aspect, it's on that truck. We've also we also now have a tanker because we provide some mutual aid to some surrounding departments. One thing that we found out after the tornado is that our water system was affected a little bit, so we needed something with some water just in case those situations occurred again. So we've added about 4 or 5 new trucks since the tornado.
Now, when responding to emergencies or accidents, even we have Interstate 44 and I-49 coming closer through town. Your department will respond on those within the city limits when you have those accidents.
That's exactly right, and that's one of the key reasons why I'm trying to put Station 7 where I'm going to put it is easy access to both of those interstates, and not only motor vehicle accidents, but we also do a lot of hazardous materials type calls as well, and with that type of truck staffed out there, that's going to be out there to handle those types of calls.
Now, when you look at interstate traffic and all the truck traffic, there's going up and down those highways. You don't know sometimes what's on board if a tractor trailer has an accident. I imagine that hazmat or that concern about, what are they carrying before we go and help out is a big part of it.
You're exactly right. And luckily, once again, we train on those situations. We train on, even though we may not know, there may be some visible signs to us as we approach those scenes if it's a tanker truck versus a box truck. A lot of those vehicles are required to be placarded, so we look for those
we see
placards,
those little signs on the back of the truck.
the little diamond signs. If it's red, we may not be able to read what's on it, but if it's red, we know it's flammable. If it's yellow, we know it's an oxidizer of some sort. We may not know exactly what it is, but we know what it's carrying isn't good. So.
And when it comes to the businesses on the industrial side in town, I imagine that you have to work with the businesses that maybe are in manufacturing that might be using some hazardous materials as well, that if they have a problem, you need to know what's in that plant before you go to respond.
You're exactly right, and that's one of the key aspects of prevention is also pre-planning. So we try to get in there, and my fire marshal and he has 2 assistants that help him. We try to get in those buildings, pre-plan, know what's in there, know how much they have, know what it does, what it doesn't do, if water will work, if water won't. So we do pre-plan those buildings.
So then do you invite inquiries from companies, or what do we need to do as far as helping them put together fire safety plans?
We do, and we typically have meetings with those types of corporations that have that type of stuff on site, just so we know how we should approach that situation if it does occur. Whether you throw water on it, whether you need to back up, stay away, let it burn out. So we always are in contact with those types of businesses.
Now, earlier you mentioned emergency management, and of course you mentioned the tornado. We think of storms, winter weather, summer weather, housed within the fire department. So when we have this time of year, or any time of year when you're having these weather alerts and so forth, that's all tying together with your awareness as well.
We do. And for instance, we're supposed to have a lot of rain over the next few days. We are constantly monitoring those situations. We have a Facebook page. If people want information, like Joplin Fire Department on Facebook, we try to get those weather updates out there. We try to remain aware of everything that's going on, whether it's winter, spring, rain events, whatever. We try to get that information out on social media as quickly as we can.
So that's a source of information for the community if they want to find out what warnings have been issued, or watches and those types of things.
One other thing we do is program weather radios. If you remember, just after the tornado, we get emergency management along with us, and I can't remember who else, but we gave away a bunch of weather radios.
Right, you had some funds to help do that. Right.
So basically what we do now is if those weather radios don't work, we kind of look at them, we can reprogram them for citizens to make sure they have the right channels so they get that information.
So you still encourage people that if they don't have one of those, it's good to have a weather radio in your home.
Oh, it is. I mean, once again, early warning, it's like a smoke detector. As soon as that warning hits, you know that something's going on. You can take whatever you need to do, whether it's a tornado, take proper cover, whether it's a watch, so you can start being aware, having a plan. They're very important, just like a smoke detector is.
Right. So a lot of awareness, a lot of education. What about community involvement with the fire station, as far as the communications with John Q. Public, trying to get that together?
I'm very big on getting out. I like getting out and visiting with citizens. We recently started a program where we go out and read to schools. Usually on Mondays and Fridays, you'll find a fire truck at a school reading to school-age kids. I like getting out and visiting with everybody as a department because it just lets everybody know what's going on. If they have questions, they can ask, we can answer. So we get out and try to do the best we can.
So you like to have your firefighters, your employees, know the neighborhood in which they're serving. For instance, if you have a fire station, know the area around there, know the people who
We
are
do.
there.
It's very key to us in our customer service what we provide, where we're going, who we may be helping. I just find it very valuable.
Well, what do you enjoy the most as fire chief, being able to work in that position?
I think the biggest thing that I've enjoyed the most is I got such a great group of men and women to work with. It's such a joy. They're very good at what they do. With the training they receive, it only makes them better. You know, taking this department and growing as we grow. You know, we're building the training center. Where Station 7 is going to be down the road, adding some trucks. It's just exciting opportunity for me to watch us grow and continue to grow as the city grows, to try to meet that challenge of growing with the city. So that's the best aspect.
So future goals following along that as well?
We are, like as I mentioned earlier, our biggest goal is to get Station 7 built, get our ISO rating lowered, and then you know, add another truck here or there.
So Station 7's timetable, what are we looking at as far as that? We've mentioned it a couple of times before.
We are. We're probably a couple years out on Station 7. We're working on getting the land acquired now. And then after that, we'll start having meetings with architects and stuff like that before. So we're probably a couple years out.
Okay. So imagine you keep in close communication with the whole city administration as the city grows or areas are annexed or you see growth and development happening in parts of town. You're a key player in that, looking at serving the citizens.
You're exactly right. And you have to be in contact with all those department heads because it is a team effort. In any part of any information that you may lack may pull you this way when you need to be going this way. So that communication amongst various departments is very important because it is a team. It is a team.
Great. So a lot of services provided by the fire department. If people have questions, they may have tuned in late. The best way to get in touch with you, find out, let's review that real quickly.
The biggest thing, go to joplinmofire.org. That's our website. There's an email link on there for my email. If you want to send me an email, shoot me, ask me questions. I answer my emails all the time. And dial 623-0403. That's the biggest key.
Great. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you very much, and I know your staff and your employees put a lot of time in protecting the city of Joplin and preventing these problems for the future, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. And I'd like to thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.